Hey, old woman, hold still. What are you doing here at this hour? Officer James Carter's voice rang out, abrupt, rude, and suspicious, breaking the stillness of the evening. Margaret looked up, her kind eyes narrowing in the direction of the voice. She was a little surprised to see a policeman approaching her with an unfriendly attitude. "Good evening, officer." "What's the matter?" "I'm just tending to these roses," she replied politely, though she felt a little confused. "Tending to roses?" Carter sneered with contempt. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes scanning the old woman from head to toe, lingering meaningfully on her dark skin and plain clothes. "You don't look like someone who lives in this upscale neighborhood, do you? You must be a maid who sneaks out while her boss is away to do something shady, right?" The racial slur was unabashed. Margaret frowned deeply, offended. She had lived here with her son for several months, and while she might not have dressed in the silks of the other ladies in the neighborhood, she did not deserve to be treated like this. "Officer, I am not a maid. This is my son, William Hart's house, and I live with him. I have a right to be here." "Your son, William Hart?" Carter repeated the name suspiciously. "Here in Willow Creek Estates, don't make this up." He moved closer, his tone becoming more arrogant. "Where's your identification? Show me. Let's see if you're really someone's mother or just a phony vagrant." "I was in my own yard, and I didn't have my wallet or identification with me," Margaret replied, her voice starting to harden a little at the unfair treatment. "And I have no obligation to show you my papers when I've done nothing wrong. Tell me, what legitimate reason would you have for stopping me and asking me such unreasonable questions?" Margaret's calm, clear-headedness and questioning of his reason added fuel to Carter's simmering anger. He was a prejudiced man who felt insecure and threatened by people of color, especially when they appeared intelligent or stood up for their rights. He felt his police authority was being challenged by an old black woman. "Because I doubt you," Carter shouted, his face red, his right hand already gripping the butt of his gun. "You're being defiant. You're hiding something." He saw Margaret instinctively take a step back as he approached, her hand perhaps raised slightly to shield herself. To Carter, in his state of tension and blind sasae, the action was interpreted as a threat. "Freeze. Drop your weapon." He roared irrationally, though it was clear that Margaret had no weapon in her hand, other than a small pair of pruning shears. Margaret froze, completely confused by the officer's unreasonable order and aggressive attitude. She opened her mouth to explain, to say that she was unarmed, but she no longer had the chance. In a moment of madness, driven by unfounded fear, racial prejudice, and uncontrolled anger, Officer James Carter pulled his Glock pistol from its holster. Bang! A single gunshot rang out, sharp and dry, tearing apart the quiet of Willow Creek Estates. The bullet struck Margaret Hart in the chest. Her eyes widened in horror and disbelief. She staggered back a few steps, then collapsed onto the lush green lawn, right next to the crimson rose bushes she had so carefully tended. Blood began to ooze from the wound on her chest, staining her purple sweater. Officer Carter stood there, stunned for a moment, looking at the old woman's lifeless body and the smoking gun in his hand. What had he done? Panic began to take over his mind. He looked around, saw a few windows of nearby houses open, a few figures peeking out. Screams began to ring out. "Oh my God! Gunshots! Someone's been shot! Call 911 now!" Carter was startled. He had to do something. He quickly put the gun back in its holster, then pulled out his walkie-talkie, stammering a report to the center. "Center, this is car 54. There was a shooting at the address. Subject was acting threateningly. I was forced to shoot in self-defense. Request an ambulance and immediate support." He began to make up a story to cover up his terrible act, but the truth cannot be hidden forever. The fatal gunshot not only took the life of a gentle, innocent mother, but was about to cause a legal and political earthquake that shook the entire city. Because the victim was not just an ordinary old black woman, she was Margaret Hart, the mother of federal prosecutor William Hart. The wail of police and ambulance sirens quickly shattered the quiet of Willow Creek Estates. Within minutes, the small street in front of William Hart's house was blocked off by yellow tape and a heavy Maplewood police presence. Red and blue lights flashed in the twilight, creating a chaotic and mournful scene. Paramedics rushed from the ambulance to where Margaret Hart lay motionless on the grass. After a few minutes of quick examination, they shook their heads sadly. She had died at the scene from a gunshot wound to the chest, causing severe damage to her heart and lungs. Her body was temporarily covered with a white sheet, awaiting the arrival of the forensic team. The crime scene was heavily guarded by police officers. Detective Daniel Thompson, a veteran of the Maplewood Police Department's Major Crime Unit, was assigned to the initial investigation. He conducted his work methodically, ordering photographs of the crime scene from multiple angles, marking the location of shell casings found near where Carter stood, seizing Carter's murder weapon for ballistics testing, and taking preliminary statements from witnesses. Officer James Carter, the shooter, was immediately removed from the scene and placed in isolation in another patrol car, as is standard procedure for officer-involved shootings. When Detective Thompson arrived to take his initial statement, Carter appeared distraught, but continued to cling to his story of self-defense. I was on patrol and saw her acting suspiciously in the yard, Carter stammered, his voice shaking. I went up to her and asked for her papers, and she was hostile and reached into her pocket as if to get a weapon. I saw something shiny. I felt like my life was in danger, and I had to shoot in self-defense, Detective. I had no choice. He tried to make the story seem more favorable to him, but the panic and inconsistencies in his testimony were not lost on Detective Thompson's expert eyes. Meanwhile, other officers interviewed neighbors who had witnessed the incident or heard the gunshots. Their accounts were almost unanimous. They heard the officer yelling loudly before the shots rang out. Some saw Margaret simply gardening, not appearing dangerous or threatening in any way. One neighbor insisted that she was holding only small pruning shears, which could not have been a weapon. These accounts clearly contradicted Carter's story of self-defense. Most importantly, the data from Carter's body cam was immediately seized and sealed. Detective Thompson knew that this video would be the most important and objective evidence to clarify the truth. He asked the technical department to prioritize processing and analyzing this data. The next step in the investigation was to identify the victim and notify her next of kin. Detectives were sent inside the large house to search for the elderly woman's identification. In the guest bedroom on the first floor, they found Margaret's wallet, which contained an old driver's license, a social security card, and several family photos. The name on the papers identified her as Margaret Hart, 72. In her phone book or notebook, they found her son's emergency contact information, William Hart, along with his address and phone number. One detail that caught the detective's attention was the office address listed next to William Hart's name, United States Attorney's Office. Detective Thompson frowned at this information. Federal prosecutor, was there a coincidence here? He decided to make the difficult call himself. He dialed the office number listed in the notebook. After a few rings, a deep, professional, and confident male voice came on the other end of the line. User Attorney S Office, Hart speaking. How may I help you? Detective Thompson's heart skipped a beat. Hart? U.S. Attorney Hart? He glanced back at the victim's name on the paperwork. Margaret Hart. Same last name as Hart. Impossible. He tried to keep his composure, cleared his throat. Excuse me for disturbing you. Am I speaking to Federal Attorney William Hart? He asked again cautiously. Yes, this is William Hart. What's up, Detective? William Hart's voice remained professional as usual, but there was a hint of surprise and doubt when he heard the person on the other end of the line identify himself as a detective. Detective Thompson took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. This was probably the most difficult call of his entire investigative career. Sir, Attorney Hart, this is Detective Daniel Thompson, Maplewood Police Department. I regret to have to bring you some very sad news. He paused, trying to find the right words. There was a shooting just moments ago at your residence in Willow Creek Estates. Shooting at my house? William Hart's voice was tense and urgent. Is anyone hurt? Is my mother home? Detective Thompson felt his throat dry. Sir, the victim of the shooting was an elderly woman named Margaret Hart. He hesitated. She did not survive, sir. I am so sorry. There was complete silence on the other end of the line. A silence that lasted for a few seconds but felt like an eternity, more terrifying than any scream or cry. Detective Thompson could hear the heavy, rapid breathing on the other end of the line. Then William Hart spoke, his voice with pain and shock, barely a whisper but still managing to maintain incredible control. My mother, Margaret Hart, is my real mother. He repeated it, as if to confirm the terrible truth that had just come crashing down on him. What the hell happened, Detective? Who did this? Detective Thompson felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this was no longer a typical police shooting. It had become a high-profile case involving a relative of one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the area. "Sir, this is an ongoing investigation. It involves one of our officers, Officer James Carter." Before he could finish, William Hart interrupted, his voice now icy, laced with pent-up rage. "Carter? James Carter? I'll be there in a moment." The call ended abruptly. News that the shooting victim was the mother of U.S. Attorney William Hart spread like wildfire through the Maplewood Police Department. Chief Davis, upon receiving Detective Thompson's report, paled. He knew his department was on the brink of an unprecedented crisis. The pressure from the Justice Department, the FBI, the media, and the public's outrage would be overwhelming and potentially devastating. Officer James Carter, the perpetrator, was in custody at the department and immediately placed under special surveillance. When he learned the true identity of the victim, his initial arrogance and defenses completely evaporated, replaced by extreme fear and a belated realization of the terrible consequences of racial bigotry and abuse of power. He knew that this time he would not get away with it. Immediately after receiving news of the tragic shooting involving U.S. Attorney William Hart's mother, the federal investigative machinery was set into motion at breakneck speed. The U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., immediately directed the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to officially take over the case from the Maplewood Police Department. The reason was obvious. The victim was an immediate relative of a high-ranking federal justice official, and the case had extremely clear signs of a federal civil rights violation. An elite team of investigators from the FBI's Civil Rights Unit, led by Special Agent in Charge Susan Reynolds, a woman known for her sharpness, experience, and uncompromising stance on police abuse, was dispatched to Maplewood that night. They took over the entire crime scene, initial records, and physical evidence from the local police department. While there was some coordination, it was clear that the FBI was the lead agency and had the final say in the investigation. The FBI's first and most important job was to analyze the data from Officer James Carter's body camera. This was considered the objective and central piece of evidence in the case, capable of revealing the entire naked truth behind the fatal shot. Video and audio analysts at the FBI's Quantico lab worked tirelessly to restore and decode every detail of the video, and what the video captured was truly shocking and outrageous, completely refuting Carter's initial self-defense testimony. Unnecessary approach. The video shows Carter deliberately stopping his car and approaching Margaret Hart as she was peacefully gardening in her yard, without any signs of suspicion or danger. Arrogant and insulting. The audio clearly captures Carter's arrogant and disrespectful tone from the start. Nosy questions, "What are you doing here? Where are your papers?" And racial and social slurs, "Not from around here," "Made," "Shady," are all captured. The victim's calm and reasonable resistance, in contrast, the video shows that Margaret Hart remained calm and polite despite being clearly offended. She answered questions clearly, explained that she was at her son's house, and demanded to know the reason for her detention in a completely legal manner. There was no provocative or defiant action or word on her part. Carter's unreasonable escalation. When confronted by Margaret and asked for a legitimate reason, the video shows Carter becoming angry and losing control. He kept shouting and making unreasonable demands. The unprovoked shooting. The most important part of the video is the moment Carter yells, "Drop your weapon," while Margaret is clearly unarmed. Her hand is either in her sweater pocket or raised in a defensive reflex. Almost immediately after that yell, Carter pulls out his gun and shoots her in the chest from close range, without hesitation, without any indication that he actually felt his life was in danger. The action happened so quickly, so decisively, showing a complete loss of control and possibly premeditated intent to use force. The body cam video became irrefutable, ironclad evidence, exposing all the lies in Carter's initial testimony and exposing the true face of his abuse of power, racial prejudice, and irresponsible, brutal shooting. In addition, the FBI also re-interviewed all the neighborhood witnesses. Their testimony further reinforced what was recorded from the body cam. They all confirmed that Miss S. Margaret was a gentle person, never quarreled with anyone, and at the time of the incident, she was just peacefully gardening. They also clearly heard Carter yelling before the gunshots rang out. A detailed autopsy by the federal medical examiner also confirmed that Margaret died from a single gunshot wound to the chest at close range, causing severe damage to her vital organs. No weapon was found on her body. A pair of small pruning shears was found nearby on the ground and could not be mistaken for a deadly weapon. The FBI also conducted a deeper investigation into James Carter's background and work history. They discovered that, although he had never been disciplined severely, Carter had received numerous complaints from members of the public, mostly people of color or other minorities, about his rudeness, discriminatory behavior, and use of unnecessary force in low-level situations. However, these complaints were often dismissed or handled lightly at the internal level of the Maplewood Police Department. This indicated an alarming pattern of behavior and a failure of the previous oversight system. As the federal investigation continued with urgency and vigor, U.S. Attorney William Hart, who was grieving the loss of his mother, tried to maintain his position. He could not directly intervene in the investigation due to a clear conflict of interest. All work related to the case would be handled by his senior colleagues at the Department of Justice and the Office of Special Counsel. However, with his position and prestige, William Hart still closely followed every step of the investigation. He had frequent, confidential discussions with the Attorney General and FBI Special Agent in charge Reynolds, ensuring that all necessary resources were mobilized. Every aspect of the case was clarified, and justice was carried out in the strictest manner. He appeared in public only once, at a brief press conference held a few days after the tragedy. With a sorrowful face but a firm voice, he read a short statement, expressing the immense pain of his family, praising his late mother as a kind, loving woman who always believed in justice. He also expressed his faith in the legal system he was serving, demanding a thorough, fair, and uncompromising investigation into the person who caused his mother's unjust death. He emphasized that this incident was not only a tragedy for his family, but also a painful reminder of the senseless police violence and the specter of racism that still haunts American society. His statement, full of emotion but also very measured and professional, caused strong emotions and received widespread sympathy and support from the public. Meanwhile, James Carter, faced with experienced FBI agents and the undeniable evidence from his own body cam, had completely collapsed. His initial defense had been shattered. He could no longer deny or fabricate. Under the terrible pressure, he may have panicked, had a mental breakdown, or even stubbornly blamed the circumstances or the victim's provocation in vain. Whatever his final reaction was, the truth about his brutal actions and dark motives had been completely exposed to the light. The FBI investigation had gathered enough evidence to build the strongest possible indictment, preparing for an upcoming historic trial. After a comprehensive FBI investigation concluded with irrefutable evidence of James Carter's unjustified shooting, abuse of power, and racially motivated killing of Margaret Hart, the U.S. Attorney's Office made a historic and shocking decision to prosecute the former police officer on the most serious charges and pursue the maximum penalty under the law, the death penalty. This decision was not made lightly. It reflected the extreme gravity of the case, the public outrage, and perhaps the unique status of the victim as the mother of a federal prosecutor. The Justice Department wanted to send the strongest possible message that the brutal and unlawful killing of citizens by law enforcement officers would never be tolerated and must be punished to the fullest extent possible. To ensure objectivity and avoid any potential conflicts of interest involving William Hart, the Department of Justice appointed a special federal prosecutor, Miss Elizabeth Morgan, to lead the prosecution team in this case. Miss Morgan was a veteran attorney known for her sharpness and extensive experience in complex civil rights and death penalty cases. She was given full authority to determine the prosecution strategy and present the case in court. The formal indictment against James Carter, filed in U.S. District Court, included the most serious charges. 1. Deprivation of civil rights under law, causing death. This is a core federal crime focusing on the intentional violation of Margaret Hart's rights to life, security, and freedom from excessive force committed by Carter while on duty and resulting in her death. This crime, in extreme cases, can be prosecuted with the death penalty. 2. Use of a deadly weapon during the commission of a crime of violence, an additional federal charge, often associated with violent crimes involving guns, that can result in additional prison sentences. 3. A second-degree murder, under the criminal law of the state where the crime occurred, focuses on the intentional killing of a person without premeditation, unlike first-degree murder. The combination of federal and state charges ensured the best possible conviction. James Carter's trial in the federal courthouse became an event that attracted national and international attention. Domestic and foreign media sent reporters to cover the case. The courtrooms were always packed with attendees, including representatives of civil rights organizations, social activists, families of the victims, families of the defendants, and a large number of interested members of the public. Security at the courthouse was tightened to an unprecedented level. William Hart, though not part of the prosecution team, was present in court as the victim's son. He sat quietly in the front row of the family, his face hard with grief, but his eyes steady as the proceedings unfolded. His presence, a powerful federal prosecutor watching the trial of his mother's killer, was a haunting image, a constant reminder of the tragedy and the urgent need for justice. The trial lasted for weeks, with the presentation of evidence and heated debate between the two sides. Led by Elizabeth Morgan, the prosecution team presented a powerful and compelling case. They began by playing Carter's body cam video, the central, irrefutable piece of evidence. Morgan analyzed every second, every word, every action in the video, exposing Carter's senseless escalation, his aggressive demeanor, his disparaging remarks, and finally, his cold, unprovoked shooting. She called in witnesses from the neighborhood to testify, confirming Margaret's gentleness and harmlessness and what they had seen and heard that fateful afternoon. Forensic experts presented the results of the autopsy, confirming the cause of death and refuting any possibility of